IVM.
This is Storytellers and Story Sellers on the IVM Podcast Network. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar live on tape. There has been talk of a direct-to-OTT movie model as the lockdown continues. A couple of movies have skipped their plans of a theatrical release to go directly to Amazon, and this has had high-amplitude disruptions in the world of movie distribution. It was once considered a distant dream, the whole internet release model in India because of how the industry is structured, but now it is here. The proof of this is global. Netflix is a winner of 8 Academy Awards and has 44 nominations, and I'm sure many more are on their way. And while the Indian industry was untouched by all of this so far, it is now here at our doorstep, expedited by the coronavirus. Amazon Prime is moving quickly to fill in for the theaters, and a very traditional model of distribution for entertainment now stands threatened. I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Vivek, Lath, Managing Director of GoQuest Media Ventures, to talk about this and so much more. Vivek has a wealth of experience in buying and selling entertainment and rights, and I want to really get this down into a double episode to get his insights about where the Indian ecosystem is headed in the OTT and theatrical debate. And in part 2, we talk about how TV channels and programming are linked at the revenue end. Hi Vivek, welcome to Storytellers and Story Sellers.
Hi Vineet, how are you? Thanks for inviting me here.
I'm very well, and I'm so glad you could make time and join me. I know it's a Saturday afternoon, but I'm making you talk shop a little bit, but I'm sure there's a lot that we can get out at here.
Perfect. We are in a lockdown now, so I don't think I have anything better to do on a Saturday. I'd rather do this than anything else.
I'm so glad. Can you tell us a little bit more about what GoQuest Media Ventures does? What is it that you do?
Sure. So I started GoQuest back in 2013. The core idea was to basically set up a boutique agency for exporting content in the rest of the world. So primarily movies and television shows, but the real sort of strength that we built up was exporting Indian television shows into other countries. What we started selling was the basic soap operas that you see on Star, Colors, Sony, or the usual GEC broadcast channels. So when I basically entered into this industry back in 2010, it was a very interesting revelation about how soap operas are selling like hotcakes in many, many parts of the world, right? I saw our shows getting blown up in Eastern Europe, to the extent that someone from Macedonia actually reached out when I was working back in the day for another company to send them, Rajasthani materials, bandhanis and chudis and that sort, because
like
Balika Vadhu was the merchandise, because Balika Vadhu was the number one show there. I had no relation to the show, just that the show became a super duper hit in Macedonia in 2010. And suddenly, people that we know within the industry or trade from that part of the world would start getting in touch with me and saying, can you please export some merchandise because the show is blowing up.
That's amazing. Do they still watch it?
Oh, they still watch it. I mean, that's surprisingly that one show which is essentially so regressive did amazingly well across the world. In Vietnam, it was number one show.
They might treat it like a period piece.
No, it's actually not a period piece. They don't treat it like a period piece. It's just the relatability to that little girl. And one of the things, doing this business, I understood was women in most parts of the world, especially in emerging and developing markets, right, are same. Their problems are the same. The kind of content they want to watch is the same.
Right.
What emotions drive them, right, when they watch this is largely the same. Pretty much everyone has the same backstory in life. So again, this was a very interesting revelation, right? When you're doing this and you realize that, while the content that we produce here in India, we don't really regard it highly, right? Imagine you telling your friends, I love watching Balika Vadhu and the look you will get. Or a Nagin for that matter. I mean, that's another...
I'll tell you that. There was a time when I said it proudly, right? I'll tell you what. When I was in school, and this is like around 2000, 2001, it used to be the rage to say, I watch Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi. So it's not like... Or before that, I think Shanti and stuff, it would be like, oh, I watch Shanti with my parents in the afternoon. I'm like a good kid or whatever. So it's not like we've never had good TV. And again, the show stuff that we see today, I'm sure there are people who relate to it. No, it's not for me. But
absolutely,
this Macedonia bit is just it's out of this world. I mean, I never thought Balika Vadhu was the show that would make it. But please, back to you telling us about GoQuest.
So again, the revelation was there that there is a significant gap in the market. The way we are exporting, we are not really giving good legs and push to the content that we are producing here, and the market is much larger, right? And if we can tap each and every emerging market, there is a good business to be built out. That's sort of the background that I started GoQuest with back in 2013. And the first deal we did was actually in Bosnia for a Sony show. Kya Hua Tera Vada again. And then the second deal we did was a deal in Africa for a Sony show called Bade Achhe Lagte Hain. And that's one show we sold in 16 to 18 countries.
Wow.
And again, very, very interesting sort of insights about how people across the world look at content. So the journey literally started there, and there was really no plan, right? Like most entrepreneurs who sit with a business plan that ye karenge, aise karenge, and this is the point we raise money, this is what we do. When I started, there was really no plan. The whole idea was,
Right.
This business has gaps. I don't know how big it can get. I and my co-founder, we both started it. So we were only looking at, fine, we were making so much money when we were in a full-time job. As long as we can make the same money while doing this business on our own, there's nothing to lose. Chalo karke dekhte hain.
Right.
So again, that's sort of, it's a controversial thing to look at it, the way startups are done now. But that helped us quite a bit. And then we did some business in the first year. We almost did a business about 90 lakhs in the first year.
And you were always like bootstrapped. There was no like venture funding rounds. Nothing.
No venture funding rounds. Of course, my heart and soul belong to technology because of the background I come from. That I'll come to that a little bit later. But so the goal always was, ab isme main tech kaise dalu, ye kaise karu, correct? How do I make it a larger scalable play? But as I'm thinking outside, I see the business growing significantly, more opportunities coming on the basic licensing side. So, it's a difficult sort of piece to just keep those thoughts and those dreams on the side and continue to pursue a direction that you are doing. So that worked, and we kept on doing business over 2013, 14, 15. By 15, we started reaching to more and more countries. We opened Vietnam. We opened a lot of other countries in Southeast Asia, became one of the top exporters of Indian content in Africa.
So is it safe to say that you're the reason why Ram Kapoor is now a big star in Africa?
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And there are a few more names I'll throw in. There is a very interesting Jamaica story. But yeah, I mean, all across Africa, we threw Ram Kapoor in from that one show. Correct. He was seen by everyone. So again, one thing led to another. The business kept growing. Broadcasters here in India were looking for more and more sort of avenues to generate revenue. While they have their own teams, they were very lean. We were very clear about how a sales process is to be done, how content needs to be pitched. We had our own way of doing research and finding out the right folks. So, and how to match the right content with the person or the audience that we're selling this to.
So how big is the team now at GoQuest? And how are you structured? Is there like the data or research team as well, I'm sure, to find out supply and demand? It's a very interesting kind of problem that you're solving, right? So like, how's the team structured? How big is it?
So we're total 52 right now, which also includes our branded content business and our YouTube business as well, correct? Other than the basic licensing business. But right now, the team is structured basically, with sales folks on the top. So we have a full-time sales office out of Tel Aviv. We've just hired someone who has, years and years of experience to run our US and in Europe operations. There's a full-time office in Vietnam. So one of my colleagues, Harshad, who started with us, he moved to Vietnam 2 years ago to manage the Southeast Asia business and the East Asia business. Better part of the business, we work out of India. We are just hiring someone out of Latin America as well to run the Latin America sales. So now, actually going forward, what we're doing, we need more and more legs on the ground in international locations rather than managing everything from India. But yeah, until 2 years ago, all the operations were run from India, and we would just travel a lot. I mean, practically almost 1/3 of my year would go in flights and hotels.
But I'm sure it's a great job to have, and I'd much rather sell entertainment than anything else. I think you're like an agent of cross-cultural exchange,
right?
And I think that just feels so great. I mean, one of these papers where this guy called Arjun Appadurai talks about culturescapes, ethnoscapes, technoscapes, and here I'm looking at someone who is a sort of culturescape, who's driving that agent. Fantastic setup for our conversation with what you do at GoQuest. Now, let me ask you this. As a more fundamental question to set up our chat as well, is one of the hardest things to do is to value content, right? It's something that we face every day on the branded content side or on the production side. There is obviously a cost input to content, right? But entertainment or production is often valued so much more than the sum of its parts. How does that break down when you're buying and selling it? I mean, are there metrics that you arrive at so that the buyer and seller speak the same language? How does that work?
So there are definitely no benchmarks here, right? Because entertainment as a category is so bizarre, there is really no MRP to how a content needs to be done or sold. While broadcasters try to do that, when they produce a show, they have a cost plus model, is what they call it, where they pay producers a fixed 15% margin over and above the cost of the production. So that's the way they value it. But then there are multiple ways and different kind of content you look at to value. So let's take TV, for example, right? Typically, when we price the cost of content, we take the benchmark of about 20-25% of the overall ad revenue or the revenue that one slot will generate or that one content will generate over its lifetime from that broadcaster, right? So if we sell a show and we know that this show will roughly do about, let's say, 50 lakh rupees of revenue for that broadcaster on the show, we typically take a benchmark of about 20-25% as the cost of content. And that's how we start our first negotiations with most of the broadcasters. And a lot of times it is also the kind of content that you're selling as well, correct? Some content may drive TRP, but may not drive advertising revenue as well. So one of the things you see a lot of the South Indian movies dubbed into Hindi and playing pretty much across the board, right? They generate massive TRP. But for the same TRP, a Salman Khan movie will generate 4 times the revenue for that same broadcaster. It's some premiumness to it, correct? It's how brands look at it. I'm sure because you're in branded content, you know how brands look at affinity to a great extent. So you can't really put
brand safety. There's so much safety. Content has those new metrics that happen. Yeah.
So sometimes it's very difficult to sort of put a value to it, but then looking at what is the brand value that broadcaster will get from its advertiser if this content goes in. So you try to charge a little bit of a premium over and above the basic metrics, trying to put that together. So there's really no science to it, but there are various things you look at when we are selling content. For example, in any country in Southeast Asia, one of the metrics we would look at is what is the cost of local production out there. When they do local production, if they spend, let's say, $20,000 per episode, and we are selling, let's say, Indian content to them, and the TRPs are more or less, ratings are more or less the same, we try to price it within that benchmark. Of course, they won't pay us the same amount as they would spend on a local production, but I wouldn't sell my show at $1,000 an episode. If I know that my show is giving them more or less the same ratings of a local production for which they spend about $20,000. So this is one way of sort of valuing content by looking at existing benchmarks.
Sure. One quick question. When you say an episode, you mean a standard length episode like a 22 or a 44-minute episode?
Internationally, it is typically 1 hour. It's only in India we do half an hour episodes. Yeah. 1 hour slots with about 45 minutes of content.
Got it. Sorry, you were saying.
So there are different benchmarks. One is what is the cost of production in that region? What is the expected revenue? What is the premium that the broadcaster is willing to pay for the kind of content that I'm selling them? Apply sort of those parameters and try and price this when you're selling it for a licensing. The other is also to look at what are other content providers getting. So if I'm selling something in Eastern Europe, and that's been one of my grouse for many, many years, is, they'll buy Turkish content, they'll pay, let's say, $10,000 an episode. But similar rating Indian show would not garner more than $500 to $600 per episode, largely because also how we sell in India, we are actually pretty price sensitive. So everyone just plays on price and then it becomes raised to the bottom. But that's been the problem here.
Right.
for some time. But can we command $5,000 from those same broadcasters? Absolutely, because the benchmarks again are there. But on the sales side, our dynamic is competitive dynamics are a little different. So multiple
So,
ways, but largely these are the base ones.
what would affect the valuation then of something like that? Would someone who's a big star in India being part of a show change its valuation significantly in Vietnam or Bosnia?
Yes,
Does that matter cross-culturally?
yes,
It does.
that matters. But more importantly, it's not if the person is a big star in India. Is the person already famous in that country? So I'll give one more example. In Indonesia, in 2014, a star show, Mahabharat, was aired on a channel called An TV. The guy who played Arjun, his name is Shahir Sheikh, he became a superstar. I mean, he almost had the status of Shah Rukh Khan in Indonesia.
Right.
Still commands that status, correct? And anything that Shahir would be in would simply become gold, right? And that
Wow.
happened in Indonesia with for a lot of Indian soap opera actors. I mean, out here they would be living right next to me. There's actually a soap opera superstar who lives on my same floor, right across,
Right.
and a whole bunch of them in my building. So very normal folks here in Indonesia, they're treated like gods. I mean, Rajnikant, the kind of fan following
Wow.
Rajnikant would have if he's on the road back in Chennai, imagine the same in Indonesia for these folks. So again, yes, if the person is famous there, any content that comes with the same person, of course, commands premium.
That's just mind-boggling to hear that someone who just lives on your floor might be Rajnikant in Indonesia.
Absolutely,
It's insane
absolutely.
to think about
I
for a
mean, we
second.
have seen merchandise or gifts almost worth $500,000 being sent to the hotels of some of these artists. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's just
It's
bizarre.
insane. Let me ask you this before we kind of switch over to our conversation about movies and OTT. Can you break down for us how rights work, whether it's for movies or whether it's for TV in general? How territorial rights work? Can you just break
Right.
down for us, and then we'll jump off into OTT and movies.
Sure. So the way to think about rights is simply to think about the actual usage of it. How will it get used? Where will it get used? Who will? And how will it get accessed by the end
Right,
consumer? So for movies, rights are largely into three or four buckets. Number one being theatrical rights, of course. Number two being called the satellite television rights.
right,
Again, they're defined by the number of years a satellite TV channel can run them. It is defined by number of runs that they can use. It is defined by what languages they can dub it in, or what kind of subtitling is allowed for them. Correct?
right. And each of
Um,
these become sort of individual line items in the deal itself, but
yes,
do they have
yes.
separate value?
No, no, no. So each of them, it's a holistic value. It's always a
Right,
holistic value. Each of them won't have separate value. What would have separate value sometimes is value for one territory versus value for another. But
sure,
as far as satellite rights are concerned, they don't break it up. It's now they take worldwide rights, they take multiple languages, and they take for multiple runs across their network. Of course, the pricing is
right,
done accordingly, but largely that's how it is. You'd sell rights to other channels as well internationally. You could restrict them by the region they are in. So I could take only satellite TV rights, sell it to a channel out of Middle East only for, let's say, UAE, or only for MENA, Middle East North Africa
right,
region.
right,
And they can only play it there within that language. So it's a lot of slicing and dicing across, a set of 6 or 7 parameters. One is, what is a medium of delivery? In OTT, the medium of delivery is really a internet line. In
right,
satellite, it is a satellite or a cable network. In case of theater, it is via theater. In case of airline, for movies, there's something called as the airline rights as well, which is
right.
what you see in flights, correct? Which we call as ancillary
Yes,
rights. There used to be
right.
home video, which is DVD and pen drives and all that. All that is gone. But
There used to be rights
it's
for pen drives.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, people used to
It's
buy
wow, amazing.
home video, and they used to call it as physical embodiment right. Very
Right.
interesting terms from back in 2010, which was I can just put that content into any physical device and sell that physical device.
Wow, it's interesting to think that that is considered to be a right because pirates choose it as their right to do it for free, like without having any rights to do it. But anyway,
Right, but if companies have to buy it, they have to buy it. So tomorrow, if
yeah, absolutely.
some phone company decides to say, "Look, I'm going to embed some movies and sell these phones to customers, they need to buy those rights accordingly. They can't just pirate.
Absolutely. I mean, I wish someone tells that to the guys who sell those little chippy cards with preloaded
Correct.
movies
Movies,
that
correct.
get passed around.
So for movies, these are sort of the rights. For television content is mostly, again, TV rights or OTT rights, streaming rights is what we call it. And in some case, airlines are rights as well. One of the other things that go in television films is the remake rights. So the right
Right.
to remake the underlying story in any language and in any country. So again, that's a pretty big business as well. So if you try to slice and dice, there are multiple things. I mean, we ran a deal where Microsoft, because they were training their AI for speech recognition, correct? So they wanted to buy audio files of a whole bunch of video content from India,
Right.
including movies, and use that to train their AI. So those rights also are something
That is
that can be
an insane application, right? I don't think a regular TV buyer for content is thinking of that application, but
that
that's insane.
application. Correct.
Yeah.
So you have to just think really hard about what is the underlying value. Music is of course one of them. The songs that are out there, clips get used a lot. You use a clip of a movie from 20 years ago into your current movie. Rights have to be purchased for those as well. So you can slice and dice it across various sort of cuts and create a new right and see who wants to basically use those rights and sell them off to them.
So, as someone who's into the distribution, selling of content, how do you view this new paradigm that's coming through, this direct to OTT
Hmm.
movies? It's not brand new. I think it has happened a little bit. We have become more used to it with Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu doing it in the US and in Europe. But with the coronavirus in India, it's become a little bit of a sore point right now with Gulabo Sitabo and a couple of
Correct.
other movies also deciding to go direct to Amazon Prime.
Right.
थोड़ा पहले से भी चल रहा था Salman Khan's deals with Amazon Prime of almost a first day release or an early release and stuff like that. As a distributor, how do you see this figure in the larger scheme of things?
So it was bound to happen. It's just that just because it's happening on Amazon or Netflix, there are a few direct to release, doesn't really change how theaters function or what revenues theater generate, correct? It's a simple exhibition medium. So Netflixes of the world, they try to get content as exclusive as possible, as early as possible to try and drive more and more audience revenues. But you have to think from the actor side and the producer side and the director side as well. So first of all, most actors and directors, they hate the idea of direct to digital. I'm not saying all, but most of them, because they love to be seen on big screens. Correct. That's where the largest or, that whole larger than life sort of perception of that actor gets created when you see
Right.
them on the big screen. Correct. So in fact, I know of films where, 2 years ago, a film by one of the top A-list actors was getting sold to Netflix, where it would recover the production cost with a little bit of profit. But the actor put its foot down and said, look, you can't do that. Even though the actor didn't have any rights or say, but just to make sure and have that relationship with the actor, the production house decided to release it theatrically and they lost everything. They booked a loss of close to 16 crores on that film,
Oh, wow.
whereas they could have made money on it. So this has also happened where under pressure, they've done this. So actors and directors don't they like to see their work on big screen.
The movies business is like in terms of theatrical is a losing business, right? It's a business that fails to break even 96-97% of the time. It's not like theaters are thriving, right? And I'm trying to look at this now from a producer or an actor's perspective
Mm,
as well, right? Like while I understand that the integrity of the art and the big screen is super important for creators, ultimately making a movie is a commercial decision.
correct.
And that said, would you think that maybe smaller producers would look at OTTs as much more of a both as a security blanket as and as a distribution channel? Because I mean, smaller movies may end up opening in 50, 100 theaters, may not stand a chance to gain the recognition
Right.
or find their audience. How do you think sort of smaller or medium sized producers are approaching this?
So here's the thing. So first of all, theater business is actually not on a decline. It is growing year to year.
No,
The
I didn't mean
number of
theater business.
screens.
I meant the movie business as a whole, right? In terms of if I assume movies as a as a product on an assembly line, the failure rate of the product in terms of breaking
Very
even
high.
per
It's
project,
very high.
right? I'm not saying
Yes.
theatricals is bad, but it doesn't break even, right, as a product.
Right. So here's the thing to think about it, right? I'll give a simple perspective. So not every movie, correct, is correct for theater or is apt for theater viewing, right? It's just that when I'm making a movie as a producer, I need my film to be seen in larger screen. There is an ego, there is a prestige attached to it. But they're not for the large screen. They are for what a paradigm that was already set was direct to home, or
Right.
direct to TV, which was already built back in the US. All we are now calling it direct to OTT. So
Right.
smaller budget films, first of all, never did well. Almost 99% of them failed on the box office or didn't make any money or lost money. So of course, OTT is a great place for them. But having said that, one thing that everyone forgets is a theater business or theater revenues are actually permissionless revenues. What I mean by that is you are selling seats and tickets directly to the audience. There is no intermediary person who's sitting and deciding, look, the value of your content is X, just because that is my capacity to monetize it. So if that producer would go to Netflix, Netflix would say, look, I don't care what you've produced it for. I don't care how well the audience likes it, because I am the programming person sitting here. And in my view, or in my algorithm's view, conclusion, your content can only be viewed by so many audiences on my platform, and that's why I can only pay you so much, right?
Right.
So it's completely the value of that content. So first of all, a producer has no recourse. If a Netflix, Amazon Prime, or any of the OTT platforms say no, nothing. All that money is gone down.
Right.
Whereas with theater, there is still an opportunity for him to make some money, or there are sleeper hits. That's how sleeper hits come out, correct?
Right.
And that also creates a very interesting ecosystem for producers to try new stuff. So and that's what happened in TV as well, right? Why is TV the way it is because television guys don't like to take risks. The repercussions are really high, so they don't experiment with storytelling. They don't experiment with the kind of production they need to do. So that's why for the last 20 years, what we see on TV is exactly the same. The same will happen with OTT guys, because the amount of investment is huge. Who is going to put his asset at risk and say, look, I'm going to take a decision to pay 100 crores to this film. And if that film doesn't do well at all on the platform, imagine the backlash. So again, one of the things in entertainment business is the person who decides to spend money on the content has the most risk personally.
Couple of things that come to mind when you're talking about this, the 100 crore thing, is what Netflix has done with the Martin Scorsese movie, and very recently Z's put out a movie with Nawazuddin Siddiqui. So I mean, there are some people who are trying to take those leaps, which is interesting. But like you said, 100 crore film. Do you think that's possible? Do you think Netflix in India is will take a punt, or Amazon Prime for that matter in India will take a punt and create a 100 crore movie? Is it viable commercially? Do you think there's a possibility?
So commercial viability is definitely out of the window for them now. They're simply in investment mode at this point. You ask anyone, they'll tell you no one is. I mean, they're making money. No one's to say they're not making money, but are they making money enough to recover their content investments? That's not true. Having said that, will they spend that 100 crores? I think they will. Correct. They are trying to corner the market as much as possible. More importantly, they're trying to bring subscribers. Right now, their only goal is to bring more and more new subscribers. So if I have an exclusive Salman or an Akshay Kumar film or a Rajnikant film, or even a Vijay Deverakonda film, exclusive on my platform, I have more chances of getting more new subscribers, with the idea that once they come in, they will stay. Correct.
Right.
So it's largely a new subscriber acquisition strategy more so than recovery model at this point. So yes, they will. But again, like I said, they all sit on very specific number of budgets, correct? Which is very different from theater. A theater does not sit on a specific number of budget. So if an Amazon says, I'm going to spend, let's say, 1,000 crores in a year, correct? There's only so much they can buy. But there's more getting produced behind the scenes, correct? There are not only 8 or 10, 100 crore films getting made in India. There are more getting made in India. And and not just from Bollywood, from all other regional cinemas as well. Correct. Marathi films are now breaking the barriers. They're crossing, they used to be 2-3 crores in box office. Now they're easily crossing the barrier of 10-15 crores in box office. Punjabi
Right.
films are doing the same. So, overall the size is increasing. And can they afford those budgets for each and every title? No. But they have the opportunity to take about 10-15% of the market and say, we will buy out these larger films, but there will be so many more left for other mediums to exploit. So
let me ask you this: what are your thoughts so far on the programming and acquisition, content acquisition strategies that you've seen from the OTTs, from at least the big ones? What has stood out for you? What has felt like it's a sort of prescient move? This will set the model up going forward in what we've seen in the past 3-4 years in India.
Right. So here's the thing: the content strategy is literally changing every 6 months, if not every 3 months.
Right.
They're discovering and they're rediscovering things. So, for example, I know a platform which started with putting content with a little bit of a sleazy content and a little bit of a titillating content, and they got amazing viewership traction from a certain segment of their viewers, and they decided to double down on it quietly. Correct? No one knows, but they decided to double down on it. So they've discovered that. Another platform was spending a lot on shows, but they realized that they're getting a lot more new subscribers from movies. So now that platform is doubling down on movies. Correct?
Right.
Amazon decided that we'll do better off if we double down on South Indian movies. So if you go to Amazon Prime, you practically see pretty much all the big South Indian movies, whether it is Tamil, Telugu, or Malayalam, and a couple of Kannada films. They are there on Amazon Prime, and that's the strategy they went after. Netflix, on the other hand, had a very different view. Netflix wanted films that people appreciate. Correct? People, look at it from a very critique point of view. At least that's what they were doing in India. They were not doing a lot of massy stuff. Correct? So they took a generally very different view as far as content strategy was concerned. So each one has sort of picked up its own content strategy and said, let's just take this position and start driving audiences in that direction. And each one is successful in their way. So again, one of the things is we are the addressable market for these folks is more than 40 to 50 million
it's massive.
Overall. Massive. So there will be slicing and dicing. What you like, what I like is going to be completely different.
That's something that while I was even at TVF, something that we saw happen. We have 34, 35 OTTs is what we're operating at. And
right.
While a couple have wound up and people have decided to merge and stuff like that has happened, with more money coming in, especially on the telecom side. You've seen the Geo deals that have happened, the Facebook deal, Vodafone Idea getting investments as well. There's talk of Airtel getting investments as well. This market is getting bigger. There is no question about that. What I wanted to ask you as a follow-up to that is, how have you seen it impact the more native language markets? What has the market shift been? Has there been very clear shift in the kind of programming that they have chosen, whether it's on movie or TVs, or has it changed the financial models? What has been the impact there?
So regional content definitely has got a great boost. I'd say TV had not done enough for regional content as much as OTT has done as far as blowing up regional movies is concerned. So that's why pretty much everyone is taking a very good stand. So Amazon recently decided to up their focus on Gujarati movies. Right. So and that's good for Gujarati producers as well, because it's helping them now with more monetization avenues, and it actually builds the industry that way. So the impact has been very, very good for the regional players. And they are subsequently investing more money to build more regional content now. So going forward, you will see significantly more regional content coming out of most of these platforms. And, audience viewership has actually shown the trend as well. The more regional or the more local you create, the better off for the platform, or the better engagement you get. So the impact has been tremendously large. And I think as a trend that will continue further.
I mean, I think that's very heartening to hear, because we remain a very fragmented sort of entertainment landscape, right? The audience that we're seeing, and it's a trend that has emerged across the board, especially with the more with the penetration of the internet, right? You see TikTok happening, and that's also a sign of people taking up content creation at a much more local, much more native language level. So
Correct.
it's very thrilling for me to see more and more recognition for non-Hindi cinema, especially in India. How do you think that plays out? The direct to OTT model plays out. Do you think the first big experiments we'll see will happen more in regional cinema, or do you think Bollywood will take to it before its other counterparts?
Bollywood will be the first one, and it's already there. They've already started doing it. Also, because
Right.
Bollywood is actually a little far ahead compared to how most regional cinemas operate. They still are very, very theatre dependent. So I don't know if you know, more than a month and a half back, the Tamil Theatre Association decided to ban every producer who would do direct to digital. Correct.
Right.
Um,
They did.
and
Right.
in many regions, governments actually intervene in things like these. So most of the cinema or the industries
Right.
which is outside of Bombay are a little behind adopting some of these new innovations are concerned or taking these risks are concerned. Essentially because how they operate, the associations, the local bodies, and essentially who are the ones running that industry makes a lot of difference. Correct.
Right.
In Bombay, in Bollywood especially, the Producers Association or the Theatre Association, they're strong, but they don't command political power the way South Indian associations or even other regional associations
Right.
do.
Right.
So that's one nuance that comes at play quite a bit on how and when they release their titles on which platform. So
Definitely.
Bollywood will definitely be the first. They've already done it, and I think Bollywood will continue to do it. Also because we're producing significantly more in absolute numbers, so there is more available for platforms to buy.
Got it. One more nuance that I would like to bring out is movies releasing on TV or world premiere on TV is also a very established sort of revenue
Correct.
model, right?
Correct.
It is something that channels have also monetized. It's something that producers also count on when they're doing their maths, when they're putting the movie together. How do you think TV channels will respond to this direct to OTT sort of model? How does that play out for TV as a stakeholder?
So they're definitely worried about it, correct? Because traditionally, before OTT, they have been the second highest payer after theatrical revenues. So they commanded a lot of power, and that power is, waning a little bit. So they are definitely worried about it, and they try to basically play a lot in terms of the window and offer the correct amount of money accordingly. On the other hand, some of the other broadcasters are a little happy with it, and
Right.
reason being, now they feel that the additional 30 or 40 crore that they were supposed to contribute, some of that can go down, correct? So their essential cost can go down, and that gap can be fulfilled by the OTT platforms
Right.
themselves.
Right. So they
Um,
have more defensibility, one more
ab-
buyer in the market.
abs- there's one more buyer in the market, so what they're trying to now get to at, look, if OTT does the same day release as me, how much money do I lose in advertising versus the cost reduction I get for the same title if OTT goes
Right.
simultaneously. So if a 50 crore film I'm able to buy at 25 crore, but my revenue has not dropped more than 20%, it's still a win-win for me. But again, it's still a very new phenomena. So the push and pull or the peak of the push and pull is yet to be seen. Broadcasters are still, they want to buy these large titles. They still want to be able to run those world premieres or mega premieres.
They're
But
money spinners for them, right?
the money
That
spinners for
turns
them, and that's why most of them have output deals as well, correct? So
right.
with the actors, so that get locked as well. But like I said, there's so much enough and more made, correct? So tomorrow, if I don't get one out of the five Akshay Kumar films that get made in a year or four Akshay Kumar films that get made in a year, it's okay. There's still so
Right.
much more made that it doesn't matter.
Right. My last question to you before we wrap
Mhm.
up the OTT and movie theater segment is: in about 5 to 10 years' time, do you see Reliance winning the Indian entertainment scene, or do you see Reliance winning the Indian entertainment scene?
That's a good question. Um, so yes, I think in the end the winner will be Reliance. Not 5 years, but definitely 10 years. Not because they're investing so much on the entertainment content production and all that, but they will probably become the only pipe which will be delivering content to most consumers in India. And
Right.
in the end, whoever owns the pipe owns everything.
Absolutely. I
So
think
they can
distribution is
go out
king.
and squeeze anyone, correct? So I think it will be the biggest person by virtue of owning the pipe that takes that content. And then, you know, how regulations are in India, they can do whatever they want. They can then decide, oh, Karan Johar, I don't like you. तेरा तो बिट रेट कम हो गया अभी तेरा जो भी टाइटल जा रहा है जिसको भी जा रहा है वो 380p पे ही जाएगा अभी कर लो जो करना है you know
Right.
but
Well, it opens up very difficult questions, the OTT landscape. But we'll save that for the next episode. That brings us to the end of the first part of my chat with Vivek Lath. Tune in next week for part 2 of our conversation, where we talk more about how TV channels and programming is linked to revenue.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. Really, really fun week, and I think that you guys should definitely check out some of the stuff we did. So we had Shifa Mehta, who is the host of the show Smile India, on the Paperback podcast. Really fun thing. On Edges and Sledges, our hosts had an episode just amongst themselves. No guests this time. Really fun show with lots of cool banter. I think you'll enjoy that quite a bit. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet had Shrishti Bell on. Shrishti is the head of Netflix in India, and I think you'll really enjoy that conversation as well. Also, do check out Uncle Please Sit. Joel and Tushar had Anuya Chatakar on. Anuya hosts the popular YouTube channel Books on Toast. And don't forget others of your old favorites like The Habit Coach, Football Should Ball, All Things Policy. All of them are doing a great job during this pandemic, and you should definitely check them out. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.